Nothing can defy the laws of economic gravity forever. Hi, I'm John McNeil, and this is the Invest Strong Network. Welcome. So I make that statement in relation to the current economic situation in Russia. So we're coming up very rapidly on the 1 year anniversary of President Putin's all-out war in Ukraine. Now, as a response to this attack, the Western powers, but also some others, have put very, very stringent economic, financial, industrial sanctions on Russia in order to get them to back off this operation in Ukraine. Now, this whole situation gives me an opportunity to put on my historian's cap and look for parallels in history. And yes, there absolutely are some. Now, of all of the analogous situations that I think would be apropos for this particular environment, I think the one that is most analogous would be the situation of Imperial Germany during the First World War. So in 1914, Germany, along with its ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, embarked upon this cataclysmic war in Europe. It set the German Empire versus Russia to the east and Britain, France, and Belgium to the west. Now, this was particularly deleterious to Germany. Germany had an industrial economy then, as they do now. They did an awful lot of trading, right? And this trade was critical to the function of the German economy. Well, obviously, being at war with almost all of your neighbors is going to be very deleterious to trade. And in fact, it was. So the Western powers had put some very, very stringent sanctions on Imperial Germany in 1914. Now, Germany was able to remain rather buoyant, right, for the first couple of years. But a combination of the tremendous cost of the military campaign, along with the disastrous effects of economic sanctions on the economy, would eventually create a death spiral for Imperial Germany that would inevitably lead to their defeat in 1918. Now, what's really amazing about the situation there with Imperial Germany is that years before the military defeat, Germany had already been economically defeated, right? So by 1917, you had a situation where German people were starving, plants were shutting down, just the soldiers not being paid, rations, they're down to a single ration a day. Some were actually down to maybe a few rations for an entire week. And equipment was hard to come by. Operational equipment, that is, was hard to come by. And what began as a trickle of defeat became a torrent by the summer and fall of 1918, and Germany, the Kaiser Wilhelm and his guys eventually just said, to heck with this, right? But when you look at what brought down Imperial Germany, it's very strikingly similar to what's going on in Russia, except Imperial Germany was in a much better financial shape going into the First World War than Russia was going into this situation in Ukraine, because the Western powers, the United States in particular, had put sanctions on the Russian economy going back to its original occupation of Crimea back in 2014. This weakened the Russian economy, along with low oil prices for most of that period, and of course the CV-19 pandemic. All of those things put a real wallop on the Russian economy, as it did globally, but especially the Russian economy, since it was so dependent on high oil and gas prices. Well, President Putin, sensing that economic sanctions would be emanating from this operation in Ukraine, did a number of things to try to insulate the country from the effects, the financial effects of what was inevitably going to happen. But the actions that he and his cronies in the Kremlin took to try to bolster the value of the ruble, to try to use international blackmail to force the European countries to continue to buy their oil and gas, all of these things would eventually fail, right? And not only fail, but fail rather spectacularly. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but wait, Brother John, the Russian economy is still holding up fairly well. Well, the rot has already seeped in, right? And the termites are eating at the foundation. I'm telling you, friends, anyone watching this video, I'm telling you, as a historian and a close researcher of financial and geopolitical history, it is just a matter of time before the Russian economy is brought low, right? Now, I think unlike the situation with Imperial Germany, where it took basically 4 years from beginning to end to have the desired effect, I believe the situation with contemporary Russia is going to happen much faster, right? First of all, the sanctions are much broader. They are much more targeted. And also, Russia is having to spend just a tremendous amount to keep these operations in Ukraine going, right? And the effects of the sanctions are really beginning to build speed, right? And it's having an effect in every aspect of Russian society. Now, as many people will point out, Russians are actually rather used to being deprived of things, right? So they may tough it out. But no, as their predecessor, the Soviet Union, discovered, there comes a point when the whole thing just cannot be propped up any longer. The law of economic gravity will eventually bring Russia down. When, you ask? Well, it's hard to say for sure. I mean, you have situations like North Korea, Cuba, and Iran that have survived under crushing economic sanctions for decades, right? You have others like the aforementioned Soviet Union, Iraq, and some of these African countries, South Africa in particular, where economic sanctions would eventually bring down or seriously degrade a regime to the point of collapse within half a decade, right? What will be the situation in Russia? In my opinion, looking at all of the various criteria, I think by the end of 2023, if Russia is still engaged in this war in Ukraine, the entire Russian economy will be laid low by the beginning of 2024, right? I mean, we've already seen massive losses in oil and gas revenue, massive collapse of tax revenue to the state. That tax revenue is desperately needed to fund their war effort. The industrial sanctions have made their military equipment crap, which is a real blow since their equipment was already crap to begin with, and it made it much worse since they could not get their hands on components, Western-made components, to enhance the quality of their weaponry. The whole thing is going to end very, very badly. And Mr. Putin and his gang, they're keeping it. They're defying the laws of economic gravity for now, just like Imperial Germany did for a while. But I'm telling you, it is not going to work, right? And if they try to keep this up beyond this year, Russia will be ruined, right? And it's already halfway there, but I'm talking all the way there, right? That could very, very well happen by the beginning of the winter of 2023, 2024. All right. So those are my thoughts for this week. If you found them insightful, informative, hit that thumbs up button for me, please. I'd really appreciate it. Also, leave your thoughts, comments on this whole situation in Eastern Europe. I'd be interested to know. And of course, subscribe! Please subscribe to Invest Strong. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, friends, and good blessings.